Oh, Tyler, will you be
How
joining
we
us
doing?
on? Doing good. Will you join us on video today or
Yes, I will. I'm sorry. I'm in my truck and I'm trying to. I hope that's all right.
that's okay. As long as you've got time for us today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We've been very excited about this. Trying to figure out the best way. I used to have one of those, one of those like truck mounts,
Oh
and
yeah, those things are nice.
it gets so hot here, and it just one day I came in and it just decided it wasn't going to work for me no more. So here
Where
we are.
where are you located out of, Tyler? Actually, I'm not familiar with where you're from.
Yeah, so I am in the Texas Gulf Coast. So I'm
Okay.
south of Houston,
Yeah.
in Victoria County,
Okay.
the birthplace of Texas, actually.
Absolutely. I was in Goliad and we toured not where Alamo happened, but the other.
Yeah, the Battle of Goliad.
Yeah, there you go. Oh my god, I'm retarded. Okay. Yeah, no, it's you just really learn about all the Texas history and the Six Flags and the what's the one with the arm? What's it called? The flag with the red arm, bloody arm.
Um,
I'm gonna look it up.
I'll have to look that one up.
Yeah,
But it was
I
like
don't know that one either. I think
it was like a sign to General Santa Anna that the people of Goliad would rather cut off their right arm than like surrender to them.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with that one. I'll have to go look back at that one.
I'm gonna Google it real quick.
that's
It's nice
wild.
to meet you. I'm
Yeah,
CK, by the way. I'm out of Idaho, so I'm freezing, and you're probably really hot.
We're at 79 degrees today.
Yeah, and super humid, right? I was just in Victoria, Texas. I think that's kind of close to you guys.
That's just south of me. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty humid.
We hit almost 75 today, but it was also 31 when the sun came up this morning.
Right.
Ooh, yeah, not that quite cold for us. It was, I mean, we were in the 50s this morning, but it's the humidity. That moisture in the air really holds the heat through the night. That's what it's honestly for our summers, they wouldn't be as bad if we cooled off at night, but we don't. We're still 90 something degrees at night because that humidity holds on to that air. It's miserable.
That's what a lot of our summers are like too, like especially the early part of the summer. And if we're having a pretty decent year for moisture, we're getting a lot of late spring, early summer, and that carries in. We keep all that humidity, which it's pretty tolerable till you wake up in the morning and it's 85 and it's going to be like 105, 107. And that's pretty miserable when it's 85 degrees and that's the coolest it gets all day. But I probably shouldn't complain because I'm not on the Texas Gulf Coast. So what do you do down there on the Texas Gulf Coast, Tyler?
Yeah,
Froberg?
great question. So I am a diversified vegetable farmer. Now, there's a long story on what led me to where I am right now. It dates back about 85 years ago. And so my family migrated from Germany in about 1901 and started farming in the Brazoria County area. Okay. And then in 1936, so roughly 85 years ago, my family bought the property that they're still on. And they've been raising fruit and vegetables there ever since. The operation has seen changes through the years, everything from citrus to figs, blackberries, strawberries. Then strawberries are what we're most known for. So in today's time, if you were to come to Alvin, Texas and take a trip to Froberg's farm, you would more than likely be going to do a U-pick session, whether that be for strawberries or blackberries or flowers or go through a corn maze or what have you. But through the years, the operation, like I said, it's been a multitude of things, including wholesaling to HEB and keeping our grocery store stocked. My family's got a huge store on the property. It started off as a fruit stand. So kind of what you would think of as a truck farmer. Most people are familiar with that term. So think of a truck farmer that evolved with the times. So a family of truck farmers that said, we're not stopping. We're going to keep we're going to keep trying to go at it.
That's pretty rare.
It is, truck farms were kind of a dime a dozen, 80s, not even in through the 90s. But the early 2000s saw a huge dip in these operations, especially as grocery stores began to get bigger, and you started to see, grocery stores in places you didn't see grocery stores before. And the truck farmer definitely declined. But my journey kind of took a left turn. So after high school, I joined the Army. I knew that I really wanted to go to college. And so I knew to do that, I would have to have somebody pay for it. And I was a middle ground student, FFA and 4-H really, that occupied my mind. My grades did not that I was a bad student, but I definitely wasn't like a great student. And so
it's more fun to grow strawberries than it is to learn about history, I'm sure.
Yeah, there you go. Everybody always jokes that most of us brought strawberries to our teachers to make sure that we got good grades. I will neither confirm nor deny that theory. So served 4 years in the Army, came back home and kind of did what I was supposed to do, worked on the family farm. And, after being home for a little while, I was 3 a.m. to 7 p.m., 365 days a year. So that's roughly 120 something hours a week. Just really, it was tough, and anyone involved in the industry knows that that's the way it is, especially here where you're growing produce in an area that doesn't freeze. So we grow year round, 365 days of growing. And so I kind of had to take a step back, and I made the decision that I was going to go ahead and go to school. And so I went and received my bachelor's in plant and soil science from Texas Tech University. I majored in plant and soil science and minored in agricultural leadership. And so from then, I kind of had a decision to make. What was I going to do with this? I now, went to college and got me an education, as they say. And so I decided I was going to become an ag teacher. And so our local school district where I graduated from had a farm manager position open, is what they called it. And so where I live, the school district has about an 80-acre production farm where they do hay and raise some commercial cows owned by the district. And they do breeding goats for the kids and stuff. And then they have 2 show barns. So they have several positions that run those farms. And so I got
had something else in mind when you said school farm, but like that's the utopian vision. We can come back to that later.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, I think I know where you're going with that, but we'll come back to that. So I did that, and then there was a vacancy open. And so I was lucky because Alvin ISD, where I taught, was known as a district on the rise, which means they emphasized CTE, right? They emphasized the trades. And so career and technical education is what CTE stands for. And so what that means is, as long as you had at least 10 years experience in the industry you're going to be teaching, and you had a bachelor's in that industry, then you didn't need a teacher certification. They could do what's called a local certification. Basically say, we've investigated this individual. They have enough industry knowledge that we're going to allow them to teach these subjects. So I found myself in the classroom, which was a weird place to be for someone in the industry. There's a lot of really, really great ag teachers, but when you see young ag teachers, they don't have industry experience. And so it was an interesting place to be, especially with a program that was heavy animal science, which we see a lot across not just the state of Texas, but kind of the nation as a whole. Anywhere where there's, it's generally heavy animal science. So me coming in as a plant guy, try to bring a lot of things to that program. And we had a lot of fun, a lot of accomplishments, learned a lot, not just about, teaching and wrangling high school kids, but about myself. But there, I got recruited. And so there was a nonprofit farm in the area that had just received a grant from the USDA to start. The grant was called the Ag Vet Grant. And essentially, it was used to start a veteran training program. So taking fellow vets and bringing them to the farm and teaching them how to grow food. And so the position funded essentially the farm manager and the person who was going to be teaching. So they said, look, we've looked high and low. We've been looking for someone who was an ag teacher, who was a farmer, and who was a veteran. And so when you kind of check all those boxes, there's only a few people locally.
Hard, yeah.
They said, would you be interested? And this was spring break of that year that I left teaching. And I said, no. I said, I love teaching. I'm never going to leave teaching. Well, that summer came around, and my wife and I just had a baby. I was running the rodeos and the livestock shows and all that. And I kind of took a step back and said, maybe I should go talk to these people. So I did. I went back and said, hey, is this position still open? And they said, yes. And so I went and checked out the farm, and I loved it, right? I realized like production ag is where I wanted to be. And so I started running Hope Farms, and it was awesome.
What year was that?
That would have been 2018.
Okay.
2018. And so in my time at the farm, I had a great time. I mean, learned at this specific farm, we were growing small scale organic produce. And so I learned a lot about small scale organic produce. Learned a lot about the direct to consumer models. So marketing your produce, which that's how my family had traditionally done it.
Right.
Definitely dove a lot into making the sale myself, and everything that comes with that. But as time went on, I kind of found myself understanding that the grant position it was a grant funded position. So the grant had an expiration date, and knowing that we would slowly but surely creep towards that expiration date. And the farm probably wasn't going to be able to keep me after that. I went ahead and made the decision. There was someone at the farm who had the ability to run it, who was looking to really start their career off. And so I made the decision to go ahead and leave. And my wife and I, through the years, have been purchasing our own ground and just kind of either leasing it or kind of letting it sit dormant until we were ready. And we finally decided we're ready. And so here we are. Now, there was one small thing, and how all of us met each other in between all of that happening. And so when I left teaching, went to farming full time, I realized quickly on that I missed the connection that I had with students. And so as an ag teacher, you quickly learn it doesn't matter if it's a seed germinating, a chicken hatching, or pulling a calf. There's a teenager there with you. Their eyes are going to be the size of 50-cent pieces. And it's going to be, stars in the sky, and they're going to be into it no matter what it is. New life. There's just something about it. And so I said, it's going to be too hard to try to bring kids to the farm. So why don't I try to bring the farm to the kids? And that's where I made the Farmer Froberg TikTok account,
which has like 600,000 followers. Probably one of the most popular ag guys.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot. And so what started, I get lots of questions about TikTok a lot. And so what started as an account to try to, hey guys, remember, like Mr. Froberg is still here and plants are still cool. And it kind of evolved into what you see today. I developed several series that have kind of become what I do. So 5 gardening tips from a vegetable farmer, and then 5 farm facts, where I generally bring other producers in as a collaboration effort. With, of course, the random silliness in between all of that. And that's what led us here today. And so what I do today is, of course, developing my own property to be growing direct to consumer produce. And then in the middle of all of that, I met Noah Young, who y'all might be familiar with. He's Shiloh Farm on TikTok and various other places. And Noah's in Nebraska, and Noah and I began to have these conversations, and him and I were on the same page where we wanted to start a business. And, it was like, we have these accounts. What do we do with them? we work really, really hard. I know it doesn't seem like it sometimes, but if you've ever tried to create content, you work really, really hard to do this. And then it's like, well, what do I do with it now?
Creating internet content is hard.
It's
Mhm.
hard. And then so you do it, you do a decent job at it a few times, and you gain, people who rely on watching that. And that's like, okay, now what do I do with this? I've committed time to this. People value it. So how do I turn that into something? And so Noah and I had many conversations, and we knew several things. We knew that we were both passionate about the ag industry and kind of collaborating and supporting other agricultural producers. We knew that we really like to be goofy on the internet. And we knew that we both wanted to remain in the ag industry, even if we didn't remain doing what we were doing, if that meant we were going to use our audiences in a positive way. And so we came up with Good Living. And so that's what our business name, and our motto is Taste the Simple Life. And so what Good Living is our effort to buy farm fresh, shelf stable products directly from either ourselves or other producers, and then market them as such. So as a high value farm fresh product to our audiences.
Okay.
And so, it's been, we've been launched for about 7 months now. So we launched at the end of spring this year. We spent about 6 months trying to get launched, and then we launched at the end of spring. So all in all, we've been working on it for about a year now. And so far, so good. Every week we look for feedback. Every week we look for things that we can improve on. We look for, of course, new products, new farmers to work with. And yeah, it's going good. We most recently launched our Texas olive oil, which our friend Mike is the farmer. He raises all the olives in Uvalde, Texas. And then it's all
they had olive farming in Texas.
It reminds me of California, where you have olives, you
Yes.
have on the coast, you have the strawberries, and it's like they're all just Texas,
Yeah.
very similar now.
It's when we look at, so the whole idea is that we are latitudinally parallel with the Mediterranean.
Right.
And so we are about, like, I think it's 250 miles off or something like that, but it's close enough where you can get an orchard established for a good amount of time before it gets hit with something.
Yeah.
And so Texas olive oil specifically, especially in Texas, how we Texans are.
Absolutely.
Has became a really, really high value niche market. And so all of our olive oil is cold pressed. We do have 5 flavors, including our extra virgin. The other 4 flavors, the flavors are cold pressed with the oil. And so, for example, our hatch chili peppers, it's not made from a hatch extract. It's cold. The olives are cold pressed with hatch peppers.
Okay.
And so in that venture, we supported 2 farmers. Noah and I will never stop being producers. And so with that, we have vowed to decrease our margins to ensure that our producers, our growers, our farmers, our ranchers, what have you, get paid more, and that our aren't.
Sounds like you might have listened to a couple of our podcast episodes about get more profit back to the farm and ranch gate. Either that, or we're all thinking the same thoughts. Either way, it's great.
Oh, so yeah, that's been our goal. And like I said, so far, so good. Every week we gain new customers. Every week we expand our horizons a little more. This was something that in the beginning, for example, we had kind of pledged that we would just do e-commerce. And now all of a sudden we're going to markets on the weekends and marketing it locally too, which is, been huge for us as far as advertising goes. Just getting, markets are something him and I are both extremely familiar with, but getting these products into the market and getting, local awareness and support is big.
So this subject's come up before of direct marketing and e-commerce in relation to farmers markets. And a lot of what I've been hearing, from friends that are in my area about farmers markets is, yeah, they're great, not for sales, but for advertising. Like the farmers markets lead to future sales that build on each other. And it's a marketing opportunity, but don't go to the farmers market thinking you're going to unload a crap load of product, because that's probably just not going to happen. Is that kind of your experience?
That's especially, so here's my deal with produce specifically is produce is not shelf stable. And so if we go to a farmer's market, we better have the support, right? Or or have a chef on standby who's going to take it all when we're done. Because taking a van full of farm fresh produce that's not shelf stable, and then it sits out for, or some of it sits out for 12 hours, 10 hours, however long you're at the market. Then at the end of the day, do with it, you're like, it's not. And I suppose the same goes with meat if if it's on display, but some of these other people, their products are frozen or what have you. That's one of the reasons that we made the decision to kind of go with more shelf stable products. It's easier to organize shipping and distribution and all those things.
So what are some examples of shelf stable products? I mean, you said olive oil, honey, obviously. I mean, that's super easy. What are some of the other ones?
Yeah, herbal, jellies, jams, any type of preservatives, fermented products. So not, any of your fermented produce, that's becoming huge right now.
Sauerkraut.
Yeah, things like that. Now, and y'all be the first ones to hear this. We've kind of been keeping a secret. So this is a Good Living exclusive. We are also working on our Wear the Simple Life line. And so oftentimes we only think of farm fresh as edible things, as food. And so we want to change people's mindset on that. Farm fresh can be anything that comes off the farm. And so this includes clothing. And so right now we're working on our Good Living Wear the Simple Life line of fresh wool that's been hand spun, hand knitted, beanies, scarves, mittens, things like that's what we're going to start with.
I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah. And so again, kind of changing the mindset of what farm fresh actually means,
That's terrific. And so the question now that comes up is if you're trying to market non-perishable items that are produced on farm and just kind of being a pass through for the farmer, what's kind of required, like in terms of maybe a kitchen or certifications, just to keep the Texas food police off your back?
Yeah, so this is a great question. Now, I will say I stay away from perishable and non-perishable only because when people think that in terms of marketing, they think that something's been sitting on the shelf for a very long time. And I always like to start the conversation with all of our olive oil is used from the last harvest. We don't cold press, and it has to sell that year. Nothing's going to be sold anytime after that. If we were going to do that, then my recommendation would just be go buy olive oil off the shelf, And so we like to use shelf stable because it says that, okay, this isn't going to go bad in a day, but it doesn't give the marketing feel of something that A, has a ton of preservatives in it, and B, has been sitting in a warehouse for 3 years before we ship it to you. And so what was your question again? Repeat your question. I'm sorry.
Kitchens.
Very good.
Kitchens and food police.
Oh, food police. Yeah. So now everyone we've worked with thus far we're talking fully inspected facilities. Now, we've already ran through the scenario of what are we going to do whenever I'm ready. I grew all my own peppers, my own super hots, and we're going to do some fermented hot sauce. What we're going to use is a ghost kitchen. So we're going to use a facility that's already prepared to do something like this at midnight when they're shut down. We're going to pay them a fee. We're going to be able to go in there and work and use their facility. It's going to pass all those requirements.
Okay.
Behind the scenes, is there stuff
that's becoming pretty popular now, though, right? Like just
kitchen
space
now,
they deal with that stuff.
Of course. you still have cottage laws and these homesteading laws and all that, but really those are more geared in most places. Those are going to be more geared towards you're either selling directly off the farm or selling at in a farmer's market type scenario. When you start talking about e-commerce and could we slide under the radar? Of course. Are we going to though? No, we're gonna still do things by the book. And oftentimes what that can look like is if it's a product that has to be processed and the farmer or the producer isn't doing all of it, then we'll figure out how to do it. We'll figure out how to get it from the farmer to someone that can do the processing or what have you.
Always call our good buddy Russell Hedrick. That guy knows how to, like, if he can figure out how to do anything. I mean, he put a grain mill in a cargo trailer.
Yep, exactly. And so, yeah, so that brings up the next thing is we haven't fully hammered out all the details with regen mills, but we'll more than likely be partnering with regen mills to kind of to pair our missions. Our mission is very much in line, and yeah, we'll definitely be partnering. We'll definitely be partnering with them on something.
Okay, so now I'm gonna have to throw a little curveball at you here.
Bring it on.
So we're talking about getting involved with Russell and our good friends at Regen Mills, and you mentioned just as a couple of years ago that you're really into production agriculture. So where are you at on the regenerative agriculture to conventional spectrum, I guess?
Yeah.
And which way are you moving?
Yeah, that's a great question. The operation that I just left was, we were growing organic produce in the most regenerative way possible. Obviously regenerative practices can be implemented, right? There's all this talk about like what is regenerative, and we all know.
Okay, how do you let's define it. How do you define regenerative, just so we have context for the conversation?
Yeah, and so for me, when people ask me that, my general response is we implement regenerative practices in areas that we have the ability to do so. I pay respects to everyone's operation. I grew up in a conventional farming family, so the produce that my family raises is conventionally raised. However, in the recent years, there has been transitions. For example, anywhere where the corn maze is going every year, my uncle really got into pasture raised broilers. And so they're running the chicken tractors across that area prior to that. And so when most people would look at my family's operation, they're not going to label it a regenerative or a regenerative operation. However, when you start peeling back the blinders and actually looking at the nitty gritty, there are regenerative practices that can be found within this conventional operation. Now, that's not necessarily where I stand, but that's how I like to tell people. Where I stand is the operation that I just left we found interesting ways to grow small scale produce using organic and regenerative practices and marketing it in a way that we can get a more higher value product. So selling to chefs, using a CSA model for the direct to consumer produce. That's hard to do with produce, right? When we start talking regenerative ag, that's a hard thing to do with produce. And so for me, it's about understanding your operations needs and being a good steward of the land and really, really understanding regenerative practices and where they could be implemented on your own operation.
Yeah, it's not like I'm expecting you to run cows and sheep through your vegetable field.
Sure.
But how are you getting fertility back? And if you say that you're using chemical fertilizer, I'm not going to yell at you. Trust me.
No. And so, no, the operation that I just left, we did not. And so, when we start talking, so we get this question a lot. And so in a market garden setting, it's a lot easier to do stuff like what you're talking about. When we start talking about produce that's going into the food system, there are rules against things. For example, with USDA organic, and I don't want to misspeak. And so I'm sure there'll be someone in the comment section saying, no, it's actually this many days, but it's, it's roughly 90 days, right? Post exposure that we can even think about growing food on this ground. And so for some people, that's a whole crop,
Right.
right? It's an
Yes.
area where, right. And so we actually had a community composting program on the farm where we would collect, members of the community could buy these little 5-gallon buckets and bring their food scraps from their kitchen. And then we would get, our biggest thing was carbon. And so we would get wood chips.
Okay.
And so that was the base of our organic matter applications was wood chips. So, we'd get 10 loads a day from the chipping trucks.
Oh, wow.
And so, so here, I can walk you through a field prep. That's the best way to understand. And obviously, timing, how many guys you got at the moment, it all plays it. But in a perfect world, what we would do is we would go ahead and set our field into rows. And so we'd have a little row maker that would set the field into rows. We would then come through with a flame weeder. We would let that row sit for as long as we can stand it. Go in with a flame weeder and get anything that's germinated. Go back through with a compost application like a top dress.
Yeah.
And so 2 to 3 inches if we can. Sometimes, you hear people talk and they're like, well, it has to be 3 inches. When you're in the field, you can't. I mean, you're slinging compost,
Mhm.
And so from there, it kind of depended on the crop, what would come next. And so if we could stand it, it'd sit for another 2 to 3 weeks and we'd let anything that was there germinate. And then you could go back through with your flame weeder and get anything that's kind of germinated. Of course, in organic produce, plastic is your best friend. And so you can utilize bed top covers to help control weeds. So, and again, it depended on the crop. If it's a 6-week romaine crop, we're not going to lay plastic for that. We use high density planting, much like y'all use high density grazing. And so we plant really, really close together, really tightly. And so with that, post-harvest is really, for most operations like this, is where it's what becomes most important. And so harvesting techniques can leave a lot more organic matter in your soil. So like, for example, when you're removing a field of collards, you're cutting them at the base and leaving the entire root system in the ground versus pulling the entire plant out.
Which that's what a mechanical harvester would do. It'd take the whole root out.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the operation, right? You have huge operations that are still harvesting a lot by hand. They would just have a machine following the guys, but it depends on the crop. But from there, what I would generally, in most seasons, we would then go back in with a cover crop. And so depending on the season, obviously would dictate what we would do. We would use anything from Sudan grass to field peas, to cowpeas, daikon radishes, a mix sometimes. It really just depended on the season and what I was going to be growing there next. For example, a sunflower cover crop is really great for a field that you're trying to lay dormant all summer or all spring and summer. But if you're going to grow in one of those seasons, that's not a great cover crop to go with.
Okay.
And so from there, what I would generally do is flail mow the cover crop once I'm ready to terminate it. And that organic matter would just sit on the top of the soil and we'd rinse and repeat.
Okay.
And so, yeah, that's the process. That's the field prep.
I like it.
Yeah.
It's like, so I kind of want to know like how much production you get per acre per man.
Sure. Yeah.
But I don't know how to phrase the question without.
So what we generally in market gardening or small scale, like direct to consumer farming, what we generally talk about is like dollar per linear foot.
Okay.
Is generally how we start talking about, and we're on dense, heavy clay soils. And so generally in your first couple of years, you might be at like $5 a linear foot, right? As your soils begin to improve on a new operation, that 3 to 5 year mark, maybe you're hopefully looking to maybe not double it, but creep towards that $8 a linear foot, or maybe you do double it, right? Maybe you do reach that $10. In certain industries like the direct to consumer floral industry, they're seeing $15 to $17 a linear foot. And so it varies. You're so diversified in this type of operation that it definitely varies from crop to crop.
Okay.
And then we generally say that it depends on your equipment. And so, there's some market gardens that don't use a tractor, or they use like a walk behind tractor. We were using a regular full size tractor. And so, for us, we could, a team of 5 guys could probably work 10 acres of produce. Versus if you're going the other way, one guy could maybe work half an acre to an acre by himself if they're only using a walk behind tractor or something like that.
Okay. So what would be some tips for home gardeners? I love to talk about supply chain shortages on this show, and I'm not going to jump on that soapbox today.
I want to preface that question with this. Whenever I made my TikTok, I said, I'm not going to talk about gardening.
Okay.
I've been in production ag my whole life, and I don't want to be pigeonholed into like the gardening guy. I don't have a growing space behind my house. Like, I don't do stuff like that. That's just not what I do. And there was a point where my growth had just halted on TikTok and other social medias. Like, it had just halted. And it was like, man, like other people in the ag industry, they just really don't want to see produce. It doesn't have eyes and a heartbeat. Like, they're just not about it. It doesn't have babies.
Like they can't go pet the cute furry radish out in the field.
Exactly. They just, so people would get it.
Eyes on them.
Yeah. People would get a kick when I would like eat something with dirty hands, but that would be like where the excitement stopped. And so that's where I came up with 5 gardening tips from a farmer. And I felt like that concept it gave me what I desired, where it didn't pigeonhole me into being like the gardening guy. But
that and the other 5 tips you did, both of those were genius, dude. Like, they were genius because you got to tag other people and their followers got to see it. It boosted your brand. Like, it's genius.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And so I realized that there were probably a lot more people interested in gardening than they were farming on social media. When we just talk about the masses and the percents of populations, it was going to expose me to a whole new group of people. And then, like you said, with the 5 farm facts, I love people. I love people. I love being with people. I love talking to people. I love learning about other operations. I love doing all of that. And so there's never been a 5 farm fact video that was just me. And sometimes I don't even give a fact. I just open it up just because the people have loved it. Because now what I found was I had a large audience of gardening people, and now we're connecting them with these other producers. And so when we talk about bridging the gap and, consumer education, we were all of a sudden really accomplishing that. I felt like we were really, really accomplishing that. For the most part, you're never going to be able to eliminate all the goofiness out there, but for the most part, I felt like we were accomplishing that. And I will say, I don't discriminate based on operation type on my farm fact videos, right? And so conventional, organic, large scale, small scale, if you're involved in the ag industry and you want to give me a farm fact, as long as it's accurate and correct, we'll put it on there. Now, there are rules though. Anyone who's collaborated with me knows this, that I'm very specific about what I ask for. And it's so funny too, because it kind of weeds people out. And so oftentimes people will want to send something like, people don't, there's lots of things that people don't know about the ag industry. And that'll be their fact. And so I tell them, we don't want bird's eye view facts, right? I have a request that I type out, and it's, if you could please provide me a 3 to 5 second farm fact about your operation that is not from a bird's eye view, but it's very hands-on. For example, and then I'll come up with something, a radish can take up to 28 days to be harvested, or, this point in the horse's hoof is called the frog. And so it's never,
A dung beetle will fly this far to find an appealing pat.
yeah,
I wish I knew what that number was.
Yeah, it's very, very specific, very, very low level on the ground facts. There's all, as I sorry, I start getting excited. Prior to
Get excited, man.
Prior to a year and a half ago, I had zero social media. I had no social media. You couldn't find me anywhere. And so as I started the journey, I realized that there were lots of great accounts out there, but they were doing what we're talking about. They would come on and they would do a video about nutrition in the soil. And they would use all of these big words and they would be talking about nutrition up here, but they never walked you through their soil prep process like I just did.
Right.
It was all of this facts and education from way up here, looking at the industry from an airplane. And it was never, no, this is it. This is how you do it. A French breakfast radish takes 28 days to germinate. And, when you transplant something, this is how you should do it. And don't confuse that with how-tos, right? That's what I always say with the farm facts too, is I don't want a how-to. I want an actual ground level fact. And that's how that came to be.
Okay. What's your favorite crop to grow?
Easy, okra.
Why?
And here's why. So first off, okra is it's the underdog. It's one of the most underrated. And frankly, it's a vegetable that people turn their nose up to, right? They think of slimy. I think I've heard now that there was a vegetable there's a commercial in the early 80s that talked about how slimy okra was, right? Which I hate. Stuff like that does awful things for our industry. For example, cereal, right? Cereal being the most important thing to eat in the morning. Like it does awful things for our industry. Even when it's proved false in a lawsuit, people don't get that marketing out of their mind from 20 years ago. Right. So okra. So first off, right, we got like 85 different varieties of okra that we can grow. And so if you say you don't like okra, well, hang on just a second. Let's try a new variety. There's also, much like almost every other vegetable, there's a million ways to cook it. Right. And so, and I would highly encourage everyone to stay away from boiling it.
You can do something other than fry it.
Yes. So my top two ways are to blacken it. And so get your cast iron nice and hot, use some good living olive oil, and then take that okra and just sear it as hot as you can in that cast iron all the way around. A little bit of fresh sea salt and soy sauce. Good to go.
Okay.
Whole. Don't do nothing to it. The next way is corn okra pancakes. So picture fried okra.
Good. That's what I've grown up eating. Yeah.
Yeah, but in a patty, right? So slice your okra.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically the lazy way to make fried okra.
Yes.
So take your Region Mills cornmeal, mix it up into make hot water cornbread though. If you're from the South, you're familiar with that concept. You don't want to make regular cornbread. You want to make hot water cornbread mix. Take your okra, slice it up in there, and then pour it like a pancake. You don't have to dip each okra out individually. Tastes better in a cast iron because you taste the last 30 days.
It's so good. Yeah.
But and those are my two favorite ways. Now it's not just eating, right? It also goes to a management tactic. I'll be honest. Okra sucks to harvest. You have to harvest it at least every other day or it gets too big. It's got little spines on it, so it gets real itchy. We've learned to either ignore it or wear protective gear when you harvest it. We have backpacks that we wear so we can use both hands to harvest. But post crop is where I see okra being the most valuable because it is essentially a cover crop. This is a plant that grows 15 feet tall. It grows 3 feet wide. So when you're growing on a 30-inch bed, it's perfect. It covers the entire bed and the aisle in shade. So you get very little weed growth once the plants are established, which is right. That's like our number one or number two reason that we would use a cover crop. is to reduce our seed bed, our weed population. Plant matter. When we start talking about organic matter into the soil, we need mass, we
Right.
need volume. And so a plant that is brittle, that's 15 feet tall and 3 feet wide, can easily be flail mowed, leaving it's almost like using sunflowers as a cover crop, right? It leaves a 3-inch layer of organic matter over your soil top. And then it has an extremely aggressive root system. So it'll grow in our dense clay soil, which we love anything that'll grow in it. But the roots are extremely aggressive. It holds that 12-foot tall plant in the ground during hurricanes. That's an aggressive root system. We leave it in the ground. And so literally that whole plant, once we get our first frost, it'll die. Run the flail mower over it, and we'll leave it there till next spring.
You just said something about first frost, and you made a comment earlier about doesn't freeze, and I wanted to circle back and ask you about last February, because I know we all had
I
it.
wanted to know about that too, actually, since you're a produce guy. He's probably like, how annoying.
For anyone listening, the difference between a freeze and a frost, right? Obviously, a freeze is when we drop below 32 degrees for an extended period of time. A frost is just when we get a very, very light layer of ice.
Yeah.
And we usually don't freeze during the year. We can sometimes get up to 1 frost throughout the year, and that's usually somewhere between
1.
Say again?
Up to 1.
Up to 1. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now, last February. So not to sound like the tinfoil guy, right? But I was the guy February 12th, February 10th of 2021 saying, like, y'all don't get it. This is going to be bad. Like, Farmer's Almanac says it's going to be awful. The news says it's going to be awful. Like, if anyone is taking this lightly, then you're wrong. You are wrong. We are going to wake up the day after Valentine's Day, and the landscape is going to change. We're south of Houston. There's tropical plants everywhere.
Oh, absolutely.
The landscape, like, people couldn't grasp that concept, and they looked at me like I was crazy. So the landscape is going to change. We're going to have trees that have been in the ground for 35 years, because that was the last time this really happened here, and they're going to be gone.
Yeah.
And then sure enough, so I stayed at the farm most of the time. I obviously made sure my family was safe and all that. And so that first night, it was interesting. It started to snow pretty early on. Like right when the sun went down, it started to snow, which then created a layer of ice on our hoop house. Now, we don't have greenhouses here. We have hoop houses.
Right.
And so they're plastic houses generally used for propagation with no alternative temperature control. So no heating source, no cooling source. And so what we decided to do we couldn't find a propane heater anywhere. And so what we decided to do to start off was we were going to bring in 3 feet of compost and cover our entire floor in it. And that worked really well for like the first 6 hours. For the first 6 hours, I was sitting in there basically sweating, watching it snow through the plastic. The snow was building up on the plastic.
Hey, man. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm just kind of watching it. I'm like, okay, we're going to be okay. And then I started, it started to kind of cool off in the greenhouse, which I expected. But I had gotten these electronic thermometers that would send my messages to my phone. And I started watching them, and, it hit 50 degrees, and then it hit 40 degrees, and then it pushed 38. Now, mind you, we seed our tomatoes January 1st.
And this was on the first night, right?
This was on the first night. We seed our tomatoes.
Yeah.
And so I had tomatoes that were ready to go in the ground. We generally plant February 14th. Like, we generally will transplant our tomatoes the 2nd or 3rd week in February. And so I had tomatoes that were ready to go out. The only reason that I didn't plant them like an early planting was because the Farmer's Almanac said, hey, it's probably going to snow in Texas and Oklahoma, just so y'all know. And so I was like, guys, like, we use this document as a guiding tool. Dates might be a little off. Let's just hold off to like the 3rd or 4th week in February. And so temperature got like to 35 in the hoop house that night. And I'm just watching it like, okay, tomorrow's supposed to be colder. I got to figure something out. So sun comes up, and everything was covered in a light layer of snow. We didn't get it heavy. The snowfall did not come heavy, but everything was white. So I kind of walked outside that morning and thought, okay, I got to figure something out. At this point, once the sun came up, it went from 38 degrees in the hoop house to 112 degrees immediately. As soon as the sun hit that plastic house, that compost started getting hot. I had to reopen everything in the greenhouse and let it air out and then close it at lunchtime. It would immediately open it up again. I kept having to do that all day to kind of let it vent. Again, our systems, they're just not made for this.
Right.
So that second night, I decided I would go ahead and start a fire. And in fact, we don't use smut pots anymore. Right.
Yeah.
And so I had to make some. And
Say.
so I made a bunch of little ones. The hanging metal chicken feeders.
Yes.
Okay.
I took those, I cleaned and emptied them out. The chickens weren't eating anyway. It's so cold. They still had food. That's a joke. But, and I lined our greenhouse in those, and I started a huge fire outside, and all night I would keep those full of coals. It got very smoky, but it stayed warm. Right. That night I was able to maintain it about 35, 36 degrees. And so it got about 16 degrees that night. And I was able to keep that like 20 degree temperature increase in there. And that was burning all night.
Yeah.
And so the third night I went in ignorantly, especially as a young grower who had never experienced this before. I went into it. I had kind of looked at the forecast, and it kind of said, okay, we're not supposed to drop below freezing. We are supposed to drop below. We're not supposed to drop below. Went right at sundown, closed everything up real tight, got everything burning real good, and left. And I told myself, we hadn't lost power. We had never lost power. So I told myself, if my phone goes off, I'm going to come back. Went home. We go to sleep, we lose power, which means the thermometers can't send signals to my phone.
Right.
And you didn't have anything that told you that it lost power there.
Right. Because in your
Correct.
sleeping, you think no news is good news when you're sleeping.
No news is good news. Yes. So I woke up and realized I look at it, and it tells me what I thought was the temperature, 38 degrees. Oh, we're good. And then I realized it said the last update that when it was 38 degrees was like 9 p.m. So I panic. I drive out to the farm as quick as I can. When you get close to the thermometer, it'll manually upload the night's temperatures. I realized that it dropped to about 27 degrees in there.
Ooh.
Now, this also teaches you some things about plant resiliency and how much frost can play a part in busting plant cells.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, we learned a lot about ambient temperatures. And so all around the outside, along the plastic of the greenhouse, we lost almost everything. But as you creeped closer into the greenhouse, you saw that, if it was 27 degrees for 10 hours in there, it was 27 degrees everywhere, but it wasn't 27 degrees on the leaf surface, right? The ambient temperature around the leaf was not 27 degrees. And you realize frost plays a huge role in that. And then 24 hours of below freezing plays a huge role in that. So it wasn't a total loss. We lost at Hope Farms, we lost about 85% of the field, and about 30 to 40% in the hoop house. The unfortunate thing is of that 30 to 40% in the hoop house, a large majority of it was our tomatoes because it was just so cold. We didn't lose all of them, but we lost a lot of them. And so we immediately went to replanting, right? A panicking vegetable farm that just lost everything. It's the only thing you can do. We, of course, in our pre-freeze preparation, we harvested everything we could. And then we used every bit of remay frost cloth, as most people know it, to cover everything we could, knowing that it was just kind of up in the air at this point. And so we went back in with all of our baby greens, because those only take 4 weeks, all of our radishes, because those only take 4 weeks. Anything that would be really quick, we went back in with immediately. And then slowly but surely started to replant everything else. Lost 100% of citrus.
I was going to say citrus sounded like they took the biggest hit.
Yeah. you know, that most of the citrus here is grafted onto trifoliate rootstock. So a lot of that rootstock, in fact, if you drive around, you see, you know, the rootstock, it grows so quick. It's 6 foot tall now. But it's trifoliate coming back everywhere. Most people lost 100% of their citrus.
Wow, that I knew they grew citrus down there, but I didn't know that most of the South Texas citrus was grafted onto another tree.
Yeah. So almost all of it is.
Yeah.
There's two varieties. So I know the Meyer lemon does pretty well on its own rootstock here, but most of your other is either going to be grafted onto trifoliate or sour orange.
Interesting.
I could go on. That's a whole nother podcast topic. I could go on for hours about that.
Well, I want to know what your least favorite thing to grow is.
Swiss chard. I despise it. I don't have to think about it.
Really?
So I have this rule, and if you're on my TikTok, you know I appreciate raw vegetables.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things to do, and it's how I harvest things. You can tell a lot about a crop based to just picking it up and eating it. If it tastes good raw, imagine how good it's going to taste in capable hands cooked.
Right.
And I don't care what stage Swiss chard is in, whether it be microgreen or looks like a palm leaf. It's gross.
Really?
Now, I'll give it to it. That's a hardy plant. It all froze in the freeze and immediately came back, and it'll kind of die back in the summer and put on these real small leaves. And as soon as it cools off, man, it blows up. You can keep it in year after year.
Oh, I have some huge Swiss
Oh,
chard
yeah.
in the garden. It looks like elephant ears.
Dude.
By the
It's-
way, if you haven't had cream Swiss chard, maybe that'll help.
I have had it almost every which way, and
Okay.
it's not bad cooked. But my whole deal is that raw, it's awful.
Yes, absolutely. So you can't.
Awful. Almost everything else, I can find an appreciation in its flavor or texture raw. Not Swiss chard. Not Swiss chard. Sorry, Swiss chard.
I like it in Asian cuisine, usually that's soaked in something hot and something soy sauce.
Yeah, that's fair. Now, at this point in the podcast, there are going to be people wondering, okay, haven't heard this guy talk about meat yet. What's the deal? And one of the most common questions I get on my social media is, am I a vegan? No, I am not a vegan. I believe in a very well-rounded plate with equal portions of everything you're eating. And I enjoy eating around a plate, right? Whether it be a medium rare steak or some pasture-raised poultry or even pork. Gotta love some pork.
I was just before we got on to record this today, I was just doing a little bit of background on you. And isn't there a steakhouse located at your farm stand?
Well, so my family's farm is
Froberg farm stand. I mean, you can probably
Yeah.
imagine why that came up in a Google search.
Of course, yes. And so so Ray Greek is his name. He came to my family in the 90s, real good friends with my grandfather, and he started doing meat processing. And so that just evolved, and now he's got a full section of the store, does all of his own meat processing, including game. And all sorts of stuff, you name it. Greek smokehouse.
I can imagine that's not a popular place to eat at all.
Yeah, there are people who come just for that, right?
How many months do you have to get reservations months in advance to get into a place like that? Because I can imagine a steakhouse, smokehouse that's co-located with a slaughterhouse and a farm stand. You know everything's going to be fresh.
Everything's going to be good and fresh, which, you know, not to get deep or philosophical, but those are the elements that have played into my life. That's how we came up with Taste the Simple Life for good living. It's like fresh is always been something that's played an impact in my life, my entire life. I always like to say I was never really introduced into like properly prepared or fancy cooked cuisine growing up, right? We just ate what grandma cooked, and it was always fresh. There's never anything like out of the ordinary. it was fresh, but it wasn't out of the ordinary, right? It's not like,
And it was kind of probably seasonal too.
oh, it's extremely
I mean,
seasonal.
no avocado toast in February, no strawberries in December.
No, yeah, no. Well, depends on the year. So,
Yeah.
so strawberries in Texas is really interesting because we plant in October, and if it's a warm winter, then you can pick some early berries in November and December. Usually, though, they will overwinter, and as soon as it warms up, February timeframe, I mean, they just turn on, and you're picking berries. But so yeah, I always like to say the fanciest thing that I ever ate was a strawberry biscuit. So grandma at the end of strawberry season would make these homemade buttermilk biscuits, and we'd go and pick the last bit of strawberries and cut them up and eat them with the biscuit. And that was probably the fanciest thing we ever ate. Right. But now I have this 3 years of experience growing and selling to chefs. My cuisine mindset is kind of broadened, and I find myself at home cooking ways that I never ate growing up. Right? I experimenting, and I saw that in so and so's kitchen. I really wanted to try making that. A cucumber gazpacho, for example. I didn't even know what gazpacho was about 2 years ago. And now here I am, like in the spring. I'm like, I can't wait for cucumber gazpacho.
What is gazpacho?
It's like cold soup, basically.
Yeah, traditionally made with tomatoes. So picture like a cold tomato soup, but walking into a restaurant, they use cucumbers, and I mean, it's one of the most incredible things you've ever eaten.
Especially in the heat of the summer. Like, it's just refreshing.
So refreshing.
There's got to be more to it than just cold soup, because cold soup's never that good. I think that's why we invented microwave.
It's pretty good.
So I want to talk about your Army time. When was that? In
2010 to 2014.
2010 to 2014. So yeah, I would have gotten out in 2006. So
okay.
What was your MOS?
I was a 91 Foxtrot. So small arms and artillery repairman.
Interesting.
Yeah. What was your MO? I didn't even, I guess I did know that you were in.
I was a Navy guy. I spent a little over 8 years in the Navy, and I was primarily main machinery. I spent 4 years as a machinist mate. Then I cross-rated to gas turbine technician mechanic, and did that for about 4 years.
Awesome.
So I did 2 boats and a shore command. And after I did shore duty, I was kind of like, I don't like this part of the Navy. Send me back to sea. And they said, no. I said,
No.
Okay, I'm leaving.
I'm out of here.
Yeah. Shore duties for the birds. I like boats.
Sure. I don't think I've ever told this story on a podcast before, but my situation was kind of similar. I was stationed in Washington State, which I liked for 6 months out of the year. The other 6 months, awful. But I didn't dislike my job. It was just a job to me, right? And so halfway through my Army career, I find out that 68 Tango is a job, and what that is the animal veterinarian assistant. Right? I felt like that kind of played to my strengths, just growing up in a farming environment.
Did you get mad at your recruiter? Like, why in the hell didn't he tell me about this?
That wasn't the thing. And so how the story goes, I went to the retention office, and they said, "Oh, we got you." And they said, "We got you a school date. You just got to sign right now." And I was like, I need a night. And they were like, "Well, after 12 hours, the reservation expires, so it's up to you." I said, okay. I came back the next day, and they're like, "You can go to school in 3 years. You're gonna have to re-enlist to stay here for the next 3 years before you can go to school." And I said, I'm going back to Texas.
That's probably fair.
Yeah.
And the Navy never really did anything like that, but like opportunities to cross train from one job to another, they weren't very common. And I was one of the few people that went from one rate to another, but it was just like going from one kind of mechanic to another kind of mechanic, and only about 20% of what I had to know changed. So it wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
So I noticed a couple other things. Have you done, we talked about composting. Have you done any worms, vermicasting, any of that stuff?
No, haven't got much into vermiculture only because I mean, well, y'all are both in hot places. You gotta, that's a whole part of the operation if you do it here. It's not for us, it wouldn't be as simple as, oh, I'm going to get this little bin and put it in my garage or in my living room or whatever. Like, we'd have to build a cooled structure, at least a covered structure or something buried or something like that. And what I like to, do I understand the benefit? Yeah. Have we gotten into it? No, we haven't.
Okay, it's probably not easy to do at the scale that you need it done.
And that's the thing, is could we do a small demonstration? Sure. And if we ever got into, like, at our own operation, to having kids out for formal education or something like that, would we do that? Yeah, probably. But I remember The Biggest Little Farm. That documentary had a huge operation. It was this huge 2-story open air building that, I mean, they did it right. You could pick that documentary apart on a bunch of stuff, but what they did wrong on the worm farming is not one of those things you could pick apart. It was state of the art, first class. It was awesome.
Okay. So other than the February disaster that was kind of collectively shared from pretty much even farther south of you to all the way up into Canada.
Yep.
What's been one of your biggest wrecks that you want to talk about? What has it taught you?
Well, so first off, I got this question. I got a question about 2 years ago, and anytime anyone talks about the freeze, I always go back to this. And so this was pre-COVID, it was pre-freeze, pre all this crazy stuff, right? And I was sitting on a panel, and it was at the Houston Food Bank, actually. And they had just brought in some producers. And one of the questions they posed was, why aren't there more farmers? Why aren't there more people wanting to farm in this area specifically? And I said, look, every year it's something, whether it be a historical flood or a hurricane. This past February now, right? And so, like, anywhere really is not easy to produce an agricultural product, right? And this place is not excluded from that, between hurricanes and
hurricanes are enough. I wouldn't want to have to deal with that.
But
I'll take drought and fire.
Yeah, I'm gonna change it up a bit. And so, and only because this is really fresh for me, and I don't mean to get, like, emotional or anything like that, but at the farm the farm I used to be at, we had the training program. And last January, I met a man by the name of Lawrence, and he went through the training program, and we got him trained up, and he was really good. And so we kept him on the farm, and me and Lawrence worked together for 9 months on the farm. And I made a video about this yesterday on my TikTok, but I kind of said in the video, if you've ever worked shoulder to shoulder with someone in an agricultural industry, especially out in the field, it's a different type of bond. It's closer to a bond of serving with someone in the military.
I can agree with that, I think.
Yeah, just, when it's 105 degrees outside, 99% humidity, and you're going through that with someone else, it's just a different kind of bond and you're problem solving with people out on the farm, right? And you're celebrating successes, and you're accepting defeats. You're doing all of these things. It's this bond that you form with someone that's hard to describe to someone else.
Absolutely.
And so, before I left the farm, I found out Lawrence came and said, look, my in-laws have been exposed, and I need to go get tested. And then all of a sudden he was in the hospital, and we found out yesterday that he passed away this weekend. And I have to say, as far as, like, struggles go, and I know that's not necessarily operationally centric, but that's one of the hardest things that I feel like I've had to deal with in a long time. There's the last couple of years has been crazy, and we never know what to expect. But here you have someone who is just same age as me, just as healthy as I am, 3 kids, a wife, sole supporter of his family, wasn't growing food for the money. So that's tough. That's tough.
That is tough. I
I
I,
think
I
this.
was gonna
Sorry, go
ask
ahead.
about. I was gonna actually ask about Lawrence, and I'm kind of
Yeah.
glad you brought it up.
So yeah, and I said this a lot. I had this big dramatic live yesterday because, you know, I don't do that a lot. I don't put a lot of like, I don't want to say my feelings, but I just don't go into that side of myself on the internet. I never really have. Um, but that one struck me, and I felt people on my TikTok and on my other various forms of social media, they got to know people on the operation. So it was almost, picture it being like characters in a reality TV show,
Yeah.
right?
They feel the
People,
loss too. Yeah.
they do. And so I felt the need to make that video yesterday. And then I went on my live. And on my live, I was kind of scrolling through, and you don't, everyone kind of laughs about the whole social media thing, but you don't realize how much life you're actually capturing by doing what we do on social media. And it's often thrown around, oh, y'all are just doing silly dances, and you're just advertising a product that someone sent you or whatever.
I
But
don't do the silly dances.
yeah, well, yeah, I know. But what's deep down, what you're actually doing is you're documenting. You're documenting something that you have no idea how powerful it could be, just like that.
Absolutely.
And in this specific situation, um, for I'd been messaging his wife, and I sent his wife all this stuff, and I mean, basically, she was speechless. It was like, here's the last 9 months of your husband.
Yeah.
Everything. I do an intro interview with anyone who ever started at the farm. I would do an intro video, which I would, whether you're training people or not, even if you're just hiring people, do that for your people on their very first day. Sit them down and just record them telling them about yourselves. Like, hey, who are you? And just capture that, right? And show, in this specific situation, it was extremely powerful. But it's a powerful tool too to look at a year from now, right? When that person is with you a year from now, you can play that for them, and you think, whoa, like, hey, what are your goals, right? Tell us where you're at in your life right now. It's powerful. There's another
Yeah.
picture too, right after the freeze, about 6 weeks after the freeze, and we had harvested our first round of French breakfast radishes. Lawrence, all he did was grin. He had this laugh, and he would grin. He wouldn't talk much. And it's this picture of Lawrence, and he's holding these two big old beautiful bunches of French breakfast radishes, and he's just got this grin on his face. And I know that it was because we had just went through 2 months of brutal torture, basically seeing our fields just brown, right? And the picture tells that story. And it's like, again, in the moment, all I did was snap a picture. But now looking back, like, I was documenting that journey.
Yeah, that's important to point out. I spend a lot of time working by myself, and sometimes it's a real challenge for me to do social media. I kind of almost feel like I've let a lot of my Facebook and Instagram fans down just because I'm not very active on those platforms anymore. But and I'm not really that active on TikTok either. But it's just sometimes social media is just so hard, and sometimes a lot of the negativity is really difficult. Like, I'm thinking about one of my videos lately that was kind of popular, and had a stock tank, had a little problem with it, and yeah, there's some algae in it. Okay, great. Everybody in the comments is like, "Oh, clean your tanks out. I'd never let him get that dirty."
It
Okay,
was clear water too, right? I don't think I know what you're talking about.
yeah. I mean, the water looks good.
It was great. Yeah.
I have 29 tanks. Those things are 16 foot in diameter. I mean, it's a full day project to get one drained out. Then you got to wait for it to dry enough to where you can shovel it out, which is a half a day project. And then you got to fill it back up with water. So it's a 2-day project just to do one of them. I have 29 of those things on my ranch. Do I want to spend 2 months every year cleaning tanks? No. I promise you, I have better shit to do.
So they feed algae to cattle now for benefits of sheep.
Right? I mean, and they're like, "Oh, well, get goldfish. Get goldfish. Put goldfish in them." Where are the goldfish? Like, I will happily go put goldfish in them if you can find me a source. I'm so far out in the weeds. Like, where am I going to get goldfish from?
Yeah. Well, and I've heard of that too, but there's no way when it gets 110 out there. I'm not dumb for thinking that there's no way those goldfish are making it through that, right? Maybe
Well,
I'm wrong. Maybe there's
I
people
do
like,
have
oh, they're
one
not.
tank with goldfish in it. I do have one tank with goldfish in it, and I kind of almost hesitate to say it because I do have them, and I could promise you this: they are impossible to catch, even out of a 16-foot stock tank that's a foot and a half deep. Like they are fast, but the one tank that they're in, like I've got to figure out how to get them out of there. Maybe I got to build a fish trap or something and just throw the trap in there overnight and drain the tank so they all go in there. But they have cleaned this thing out. I mean,
Wow.
yeah. I mean, they do a good job. They've got her cleaned out. And midsummer, I had an intern. I was a little bit busy one day, and I think his niece was out, and he wanted to show her around the ranch, take her fishing. I was like, all right, you know, the day off and take her fishing, but you got to go get goldfish out of that tank and move at least some goldfish to another tank. They went out there and they spent 2 hours to move 5 goldfish to another tank. So when I go do it, I'm going to have a plan.
Like, would a cast net work?
I was like giant net.
It probably would. I just need to take the panels out that are in the tank, because it's got some panels in there to keep cattle out.
That's fun.
Yeah. So
it's always something.
The negativity sometimes gets to me, and sometimes I'm pretty careful about what I want to post, or I'll make content, record content all through a day. And then, it comes time the evening or afternoon where I sit down and I can, make a video or make a Facebook post. And I'm like, I watch it and I'm like, oh, hell no. Some animal rights activist is just going to go nuts and have my lunch for that. Beep, goodbye.
So
like you can't even show a picture of somebody holding a hot shot anymore. Like even 5 feet away from cows, if they're just standing there holding a hot shot, you'll have animal rights activists on you. That's terrible.
I will say, because people ask me all the time, like, do you get, because I post a little bit of chicken content too. And like I have an uncle who's a rancher, and I'll never post cattle content, but I will go live. But people have asked me before, like, do you ever catch hate? And on one hand, I've been lucky. The short answer is no, not really. Like I've caught very, very little disagreeing mindsets or hate or anything like that. On the other hand, I made a conscious choice early on that I was going to produce content that would shy away from even being viewed as controversial. That if there were people who wanted to have a conversation such as you and I have had today, or y'all and I have had today, that I would happily do that. But as far as content that I was going to post on my page, I just made a conscious decision that I didn't want to do that. And I look up to the people who do, because sometimes I feel like some people might think that I'm not willing to go to bat for my beliefs or what I think is right and all that. And that's just not the case. Right. I personally
don't expect me to go to bat for what you believe.
Yeah. A lot of times for me, it just feels like if someone took the time to leave a negative comment on my video, then I really don't even have the time for it. Like, I really don't even value what they're saying. What I do really value is the kindness that I've from being on social media. Just yesterday or the day before, it was the day before yesterday, Friday night, I think I had received a message on my Instagram, and it was a picture. And it was a young man, and he had said, "Hey, I've been going back and forth on sending this message because I didn't want to come off as like a creep or weird, but I'm a cattle rancher, and I tend to not have time for my kids and my wife. And so I wanted to figure out something that I could do that would really like show my family that I really do care and that I'm here and that I can be active, like not just sitting down and watch a movie, but be active and doing something with them." And so he said he was scrolling through TikTok and he started watching my videos, and they put a garden in behind their house on the ranch. And that every evening, him and his wife and their kids, they go out. He sent me this huge long message with pictures of his family harvesting all of this produce. And it was just like, if that's the type of messages I can get without generating hate or responding to some of the hateful comments, that even though there are few, they come across my page, then that's what I want to do.
Beautiful impact. Yes.
Yeah.
You've done a really good job of crafting your brand.
It's funny you say that. And hopefully none of my real family centric content listeners are listening right now. But I've gone to a few meetups, TikTok ag meetups, right? And we go, and they're like,
yeah, you went to one right up the road from me, and I didn't even know it was happening.
Oh no, for real?
I didn't even know that was going on.
Oh man, I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's fine.
So, we go, and they're like, okay, we're gonna go out tonight. Hey, someone send someone to go ask Farmer Froberg what he wants to do. And I was like, what? So they're like, hey, we're gonna go out tonight. Is that okay? What do you mean, is that okay? They're like, well, we didn't know like and so that's when I realized, like, I truly realized that the image that I've created, and I'm not saying that's not me, but I'm not saying it's not me. What I am saying is that what I wanted to give people is wholesome agricultural education by someone with a Mr. Rogers-esque feeling.
Yeah.
I think you're doing a hell of a good job.
To where we have a TikTok ag meetup, and they wonder if they should ask me if I wanted to go out with them or not.
Is it okay to go to the bar with him? Is he going to be weirded out? That's kind of what it was, right?
Yeah, like, is he gonna drink? What is he gonna do? Will he tuck his shirt in? Like, what's the deal?
Yeah, how funny. Little nuances. Yeah.
Oh, it looked like you guys had a heck of a time, though.
We did. Now, I will say, like, I'm not a huge drinker. And so, in fact, me and Noah at Shiloh Farm. Him and I were the DDs. But we still had a great time. We definitely went out and we had an awesome time laughing and getting to know other people. It's always interesting to meet other people who do this and to learn their motivations, to kind of learn what makes them tick, to learn their theory on the subject we just talked about,
Right. And it's always good. It is a heck of a lot of fun to meet other people in agriculture, not just, for me in ranching.
Educating them. Yeah.
I like meeting the sheep guys, the goat guys, talking to the vegetable farmers, the people that, like the dairy farmers. I love it. And it's even better when we find and make these connections with people that have a similar voice on social media. Like,
I agree.
For as evil as the algorithms are on all these platforms, they've done a pretty good job of bringing a lot of us together and helping us spread our message to the masses. And I think that's definitely noteworthy.
Now, one of the funniest things, though, I gotta say, is if you ever participate in a social media gathering of other agriculturalists, do it at someone's operation, and make sure you have a diverse group of producers there. What you're gonna see is the vegetable guys try to chase cows. You're gonna see a corn farmer try to lay plastic for produce. You're gonna get to see people who very much are professional agriculturalists be taken way out of their comfort zone, and it's so cool. I think, because as a high school teacher, that's what I love doing, is how can we take a high school kid and put them in an agricultural situation that makes them a little uncomfortable. It challenges them a little bit, right? And meeting at someone else's operation with a diverse group of producers kind of does the same thing.
I'm glad you mentioned something about school, because that reminds me to circle back to the Hope Farms school farm you were talking about earlier.
Yeah. Yes.
All right. So let's hear about that. Let's hear about what
So
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah, now we're talking about Alvin ISD when I was the ag farm manager for Alvin ISD.
Yes.
And so essentially it's not feeding the school. That is not what was going on, right? What this is, this specific resource was for the ag department. So the agriculture education department in CTE to be used as a teaching resource. And so a
Okay.
long time ago, an old rancher died and left his ranch to Alvin ISD with the understanding that it would always be for something having to do with agriculture education. And so the farm bales its own hay for all the show cattle that the students raise. It raises some open show calves that they'll sell to the, we're not talking about champion show livestock here, but anyone who wants to show just regular open cattle, as well as a few show goats. And time to time, they've had pigs and vegetables and, anything that can be used as a teaching resource and create financial sustainability for the ag department. Oftentimes, and it's not as much in our area, we hear it a lot in areas that aren't agricultural centric, that don't necessarily understand the importance of CTE or vocational education or agriculture education. We don't see a ton of resources put into that. So when you have a resource for a debt-free resource for the department that is generating income, such as selling round bales and things like that, it's a lot easier to try to get additional resources for a department.
Okay. I maybe I was thinking that you're about to tell me that program was changing and it was moving towards being something else, more of a farm that was feeding the school, or did I misread that?
No, yeah, I knew that's where you were going with it, but no,
Okay.
at this point, that's not the case. Now, I know that Houston ISD is making strides in that. They recently, just before COVID, I'm sure it got pushed back, but just before COVID, they were hiring like 20 something farm managers to manage several small market gardens across the district. That would, all of the produce would go into the cafeteria system. Houston ISD has a central processing center for their cafeteria system. So all the deliveries go to one place. It gets further processed there and then kind of gets in a heat up and serve situation, gets pushed out, right? So we obviously, in that type of situation, quality concerns become a thing.
Right.
And so the whole idea that they proposed was all of these market gardens around, or small farms around the district, and all that produce going fresh to that processing center to be pushed out, which is awesome.
I can see why that makes sense, especially, a lot of school kitchens aren't what I remember from being in school in the 80s and 90s.
At all.
Lunch ladies baked their own bread to, they were in there at 5:00 in the morning baking rolls for lunch. They don't do that anymore. Everything is, take it from the box and heat and serve.
Either
And
boil it, eat in a bag.
So have you had any luck getting into supplying schools?
No, my uncle had a contract for a while with Louisiana Department of Education for green beans of all things. But this is, this is one of those huge contracts. This is a lot of green beans. This is a whole
They
situation.
want to know they can get truckloads of green beans every year. And
this is actually, those beans were being sent to a processing facility, and then that processing facility was selling it to the department. So no, maybe in the future, me personally, if we could sell everything in a CSA, that's just way easier. There's no reason to mess with anything else personally. As producers, and I'm sure you can both agree with me on this one, as producers, we have to draw a line between our philosophical operational beliefs and financial realism.
yes.
And so would it be awesome if everything that all of us grew in this area went to the school district and they used it in the perfect way? Yeah. but
And all
nobody
the
be making.
food waste came back to a perfect
Yeah,
composting system. And yeah,
yeah, but for sure nobody be making any money, you know, and um, there's just less threshold for error. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes into that, you know, and at the scale we're at, it's like if we could sell everything to 100 people in bags every week, that's a whole lot financially. That's a whole lot more financially.
Right? Yeah.
It's better. It's better than going to the market. You mentioned earlier, profit margins at markets are super low, and they are. By the time you add in getting ready the night before, going and getting everything loaded up, setting up your stand, rolling the dice on whether people show up or not, and then what you have account for loss versus having 100 people who prepaid for the season.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's not even a question, really. It's not even a question. There shouldn't be for any produce, any small produce producer. Um, I'm telling you, it shouldn't be a question if you're listening right now.
Farmer Froberg's official advice: farmers markets are for advertising, focus
Yep.
on e-commerce and pre-sell boxes.
So farmers markets where you have to start. CSA, that your farm share boxes, that's where you should be moving to, unless your product is shelf stable, then see where you can ship it. We would love to stimulate local as much as we can. But again, sometimes that's a romantic dream, especially if you're marketing a shelf stable product and you're having trouble selling it, you know?
You know, there on one hand, there's the ideal, okay, the world in which we would all like it to be, and everybody's version is going to be a little bit different. There's the path that we feel the world is on, and there's the way the world exists now. And there's no reason that while we're building our better world, that we can't take advantage of the things in the world as they exist today. You know, things like cheap shipping. But we need to always keep in mind that, you know, keep it in the back of our mind that part of our mission should be, we need to be growing this and supporting this local. But if I have customers that are in New York that want my stuff, I'm going to ship to New York, especially if they're willing to pay a premium.
There you go. I mean, yeah, exactly. And it all boils back down to that philosophical sustainability versus that financial sustainability.
And I would say, you know, sustainability, regeneration, it's not sustainable or regenerative unless we know what we're going to do with it when we're not here anymore.
Yep, that's a good point. And you know, that question now more than ever, especially with truck style farms, as we've been talking about, that question is completely up in the air. We have people who are on 5th generation truck farms that, you know, they have no idea what they're going to do whenever whoever's running it at the time is going to stop. And then on the flip side, you have 1st gens out here that are doing an incredible job. There's zero succession plan.
Right.
You know, so yeah, that's why the concepts of, you know, some people are calling them, you know, community farms or agri-hoods. It's a good concept. We like that concept. And so this is when you have a community supported farm, right? And a lot of times it's formed as a nonprofit. And so ever changing boards that will live on, that can help fundraise, you know, changing hands, of course, right? Oftentimes we see farms like this as starting points for young growers that heavily rely on CSA models. Those are the ones what you're talking about, that'll be here 100 years from now. You know, if they had their land donated to them, or they had the ability to pay the land off because they're a group of people, a nonprofit or something like that.
It's probably not affordable now to go buy land and to start a truck farm like you have.
No, that was the number one question we got with the training program, is like, all of that is great, but if you've taught someone and then they don't have anywhere to grow. And so the business model was, we have to find them free land. Like, that's not a like that's what has to happen, right?
Yeah, and I get that. And like, so land use is tied to ownership. Ownership gets to determine use and control. And that to a large part is that, like, a lot of the psychological appeal. I want to own this dirt. It is mine. It is my domain. It is my dominion. I can do as I wish with it. And to some extent, I think the natives that were inhabited this continent long before you and I were even happy dreams, they had it right. They didn't believe in ownership. They didn't even really have much of a word for it. Their concept was more akin to the stewardship of the land, that they were just put here to take care of it and shepherd its natural resources. So, and that's what's at the core of a lot of what we've been talking about regenerative agriculture, that we want to just take care of the natural resources. Hobbes likes to say nature plus one, or a loose grip on nature, to gently guide her or to gently let her lead you.
Yep.
And we have this idea that sometimes a political boundary, a line on a map, makes a pest stop, or that soil doesn't exist on the other side of that fence, that our management decisions don't necessarily affect our neighbors. And that's not really true. What do you have to say about that? I kind of rambled for a minute.
Well, so first and foremost is the truck farming industry trend now is what we're talking about. And so the kind of cult leaders like Curtis Stone, for example, he's a guy, I don't know if y'all are familiar with him, but he's a guy, he got famous, not famous, but internet famous, if you will, educationally famous by leasing people's backyards and neighborhoods. And so, he was growing up to 2 acres of vegetables, which doesn't sound like a lot when you're in other industries, but 2 acres of vegetables for one person.
A lot of vegetables.
A lot of vegetables. And that was the equivalent of so it's 2 acres of backyards. So picture 8 whatever backyards that he had his little bike on, and he was going around and raising vegetables that way. And the only thing people asked him for return was a crop share. Right. So a weekly little bag of vegetables on the front door, and they didn't have to mow.
It's a win-win.
And so that kind of really popularized, can we grow produce anywhere? And B, do we have to own the land? Like, hey, go knock on that guy's door. Like, he's got this huge area. He's got this 3-acre yard, and all he does is mow it. And the worst he's going to say is no, or, get the heck off my property.
I have this vision in my head. There's another person that I've been visiting with that we're trying to get her schedule synced up to be a guest. And without giving too much away, he guerrilla grazes sheep, like in urban environments, like on sidewalks and backyards, parks and road right-of-ways. So I'm kind of combining that concept with your guerrilla gardening concept. I see these backyards with, different vegetables and maybe a corn patch here. Then a guy's coming through with his sheep and grazing sheep down the margin, then keeping the weeds trimmed out. Then somebody comes, then there's, the neighborhood chickens that run around. And
so like, imagine if you were driving to one of these neighborhoods, right? And you took away the fences. What would you have, right? It would be a bunch of houses with just these large strips of open land. And so we think of this ground as smaller than it actually is because there's little fences around it,
If we take away the fences, how will I know where what I own is?
Well, and that's the interesting concept, right? The goal of a lot of these guys is to get 3 or 4 houses in a row where everyone in that area is on board, right? Because the minute you pop up a greenhouse in someone's driveway, now I should preface, this is not how I grow. This is just what I've seen, right? But But the minute you pop up the greenhouse in someone's driveway in one of these neighborhood settings, I imagine people aren't going to be very happy about it. And so it is like what you're talking about. You got to get everybody on board with it, but that wasn't necessarily what we were teaching our people, but we were teaching them like, look, the idea might be, hey, maybe there is a large produce farm somewhere that you go and say, hey, I just need an acre. Like an acre will support my, 75 person CSA. And an acre off one of these really, really large farms might not be that much for them. That might not be out of the question. We have one guy who went on to the city of San Antonio, and he got a contract with the city of San Antonio Parks and Rec to use unused park areas to grow vegetables, which is a big push right now for local governments. You have local municipalities that, they own some of these municipalities own 500-acre tracts that they bought, and there's nothing planned for it for 10 years on the master plan or 15 years on the master plan. Right. And so there's lots of ideas and big pushes on whether it be a lottery system or an application system or something for people to be able to apply and say, no, like, let us use that land with guidelines. Now, there's actually some positives to this, believe it or not. When you don't own the land, generally it comes with the stipulation of no permanent infrastructure. And so what you have is a group of young vegetable producers who aren't going into debt.
Right.
Right. Because they're buying a $1,200 shipping container, and everything that they own for their operation has to be able to fit in that shipping container. And when you do that, you don't spend a lot of money.
Yeah. If all you got's a 20-foot by 8-foot box, it's get pretty picky about what you can put in there.
And about what you're spending your money on. And you're not constructing this huge metal barn to put everything in. Right. And you're not, it's an interesting concept.
I like it. I hope it can. We need to bring back small scale food production to everywhere. I mean, it's not just one of those things that we just need in the Houston area. I mean, we literally need it in every urban environment.
Well, not just urban environment, right? Generally, what we see is there's less food access in rural areas than there is in urban
food deserts, right?
Right. And so we most people, when they think agriculture, they think food. But what they don't realize is you go into these huge agricultural areas and there's virtually no food being produced. There's agricultural.
You're surrounded by farms. That's because we don't eat dent corn and soybeans.
Correct. And so, it's not just an urban environment thing. This is a people thing, right? This is a people thing. And so, I'm always the first one to say, look, our food system is the way it is because at least right now, no one's willing to do it differently.
Right.
And so we have to grow within those constraints, especially large scale food production. Now, it's going to take a lot,
So what does a better food production system look like to Tyler Froberg? You're in charge. I just made you the king of everything. The king of food.
King of everything.
Fix the food system, Tyler. How do you?
And so y'all have heard me talk about people, right? And I always go into a conversation like this with, you have to think about the people first. And what that means is that we have very, very large conventional farms that are supporting families. And so I think there's a lot of guys out there who would immediately go, well, we have to cut all these people because we don't like the way that they grow food or produce or what they're doing to the land. And they have kids the same way we do. So I don't know that that's the answer. Right. And I'm not a person that, even if I'm the king of the world, thinks that I can make a decision and I'm going to go to sleep. And when I wake up, everything's going to change because I said it needed to change. Nothing great, I don't think, nothing successful ever came from us making a decision and changing it overnight and then it happening. Right. I think if there, so any type of change, I don't know is what I'm getting at. I'm walking around. I don't know what that looks like. Here's what I know is that our country, and I'm going to stick to the United States for a second. Our country is full of really, really talented producers. Whether they're growing conventionally grown dent corn in Iowa, organic lettuce in Southern California, or apples in New York, whatever the case may be.
Holstein milk cows in Washington State.
Yeah.
Didn't want to leave out the dairy guys.
Yeah. There are really, really talented producers nationwide. And I think if we were going to change things, the first and foremost is recognizing everybody's strengths. And let's see how we can evaluate our food system, produce healthier, more nutritious food that, all while being good stewards of the land and playing to everyone's strengths. And again, what that looks like, I'm not an economist. You know what I mean? What that actually looks like, I don't know. But I can tell you, again, I have a saying, and it goes, farmers is farmers. And again, it's because I'm a people person, right? We can disagree on our growing styles, but I still recognize that you have a family to feed, and you have people you're supporting. And yeah, that's my spiel on that. I believe a different food system is possible. And I believe the people currently producing can produce in that food system. We just have to play to everybody's strengths, and gosh, everybody's got to get on the same page.
I think you're right. I think that everybody currently growing food or in agriculture has a place in agriculture in the future. Nobody's looking to push anybody else out. But, and I'm not sure what page you were talking about being on. I'm pretty sure that page has the words soil health, ecosystem,
sure,
health of the planet somewhere is on that page. And,
of course,
that's what we got to agree on. And that's what we got to start thinking about in terms of how we're producing our food and ultimately how we're taking care of our planet, because how we produce our food is irrevocably intertwined into the health of our planet. Adam, all right, I'm starting to stumble over 5 syllables.
No,
it's probably time to quit.
I have one more comment to what you just said. And, I think what we see is that, again, there's all these producers out there who are really good at what they do, whether they're producing the way other people think they should or not. They are really good at what they're currently doing. And so, of course, we see people who are stubborn. We see people who are just doing it the way they know how to do it. We see people doing it, even if they learned recently, it's the way that they learned. And so you said it earlier, it starts at the top. If we're going to change the way we grow, if we're going to change the way our food system works, if we're going to change the interweb of everything that is agriculture, it's got to start way up here. Like, it's got to, there's got to quit being sides, right? We tend to, just as a species, we draw lines for everything.
We're
right?
A tribal species.
Yeah. There's this and that. There's you and me,
But successful tribes, there's more than 2. I mean, with 2, it's a binary. I'm right, you're wrong.
Sure.
If we had 10 tribes, it's building consensus. It's coming to agreement. It's sharing common goals. It's not us versus them.
And I would say that we need more of that. And bringing it full circle, I think what you just said is the goal of my 5 farm fact videos.
Okay.
Right. That is one of the goals, is well, maybe this person here didn't even know this person existed, and now they do. And maybe they'll have a conversation.
I know I've been exposed to a couple of good creators from, from your content where you've shared other people, and maybe you'll share some good podcasts, do a 5 favorite podcasts video.
That's a good idea.
Viral.
That's a good idea. I like that. Here, okay, I see. Yeah, here's my top 5 farm podcasts. I could work something up there.
Can't wait.
I can tell you though, if I put a ton of planning into it, it's not going to go by. It's only if I am driving in the field and I look at something and go, oh, I should video that. And I spend 30 seconds making it. Those are the ones that go by. The ones that I spend weeks planning, and just not to keep dragging out with stories, but I did one video, and it's the video that I'm most proud about ever in the history. And it'll always be the video I'm most proud about unless something crazy happens in my life. I spent 3 months gathering shots from people all over the world of them getting tossed a tomato, catching it, holding it in the air, saying how they say tomato, and then throwing it. And y'all are both looking at me because neither one of you have seen the video.
But I know that I say tomato with a California dialect, and
Yeah,
other people probably
but
say, yeah.
I am laughing at it because it makes me sick sometimes, because I knew that if there was going to be a video that I was going to be remembered for, it was going to be this one. I was going to be the guy who brought, and I had the most random people you've ever seen. Most of them were not in the ag industry, right? People all over the world. Like, I had at least 10 countries on there, like all over the world. Most of them didn't speak English. When I was messaging them, I had to use a Google translator. I probably sent, no exaggeration, I probably sent 200 messages to people, and 90% of them never got answered. I spent so much time putting this together, begging people to reshoot it because the angle wasn't right? Or flipping the video to try to make it work, and using enhancement apps to try to clear the video up because the shot they sent me was like, all of these things. I put so much work into this, and it was a flop.
Oh, really? Oh.
And again, I say that because I'm looking at you, and I can tell neither one of you saw the video, like, for sure. I guarantee you,
Well, I
seen
don't
the
do
video.
Sounds
TikTok.
cool.
Okay.
My defense, I'm not really
Yeah.
on TikTok. Yeah.
Well, Brian, I'm sure you've seen the video where I zipped the jacket up.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, because it's a dumb video that took me 30 seconds to make.
Right.
And I zipped the jacket up in cadence to a song, right? But I spent, and I say it didn't go, it got like 500,000 views over like 6 weeks, which is a good video. And I'm so, like, again, this will always be the video.
I'd be stoked about that.
No, it is. I probably sound like a huge brat. Your listeners
it's
probably
fine.
guys.
It's all
But, like,
perspective.
This was the video that I knew, like, this was going to be it. Like, I could shut my account down because it was just going to go crazy, and everybody was going to love it. And it was, it represented everything that is good in humanity, right? It represented all sorts of countries, diversity, all sorts of races, everything that you can think of. It had tomatoes in it, like, everything that you could think of. And it was, everybody was smiling in it, like, it was happy. And it didn't go super viral, but that's okay.
I know how that feels. You put time into a video, and make sure the captions and everything's just right, and like 7 people see it and nobody comments, and you're like, just get all depressed. Like, I put so much time into that, nobody likes it. Then the 30-second video that you're not proud of, that you're just kind of like, maybe I'll just throw it up there. It's like,
Didn't see
viral.
the cheese video, Brian. The throw and cheese one.
I stole that.
I did one where it was my son's idea, and I pretended to be a circus peanut farmer. I did this.
That one was good.
I did this whole thing, right? And again, this was one of those that I thought, this is going to go like mega viral. Like, I don't have a doubt in my mind that this one's going to go mega viral. Like, if you didn't see the video, I was growing peanuts at the time, and I had taken circus peanuts and like stuck them on the peanut plant and then buried it. So I pulled this peanut plant out of the ground, and there's circus peanuts all over it. And I filmed it like it was a documentary. Like, when I answered the questions that I was asking myself, I like faced like this. I'm like, well, we're 4th generation circus peanut farmer. Like, it was eloquently shot. I mean, again, it was one of those that like 250, 300,000 after a couple of months, but like, it didn't go mega viral. My core people who usually watch the video saw it, and that was
Yeah,
sounds about right.
that's about right. So speaking
Yeah.
of social media, I've got most of your links ready to put in the show notes. TikTok, Facebook,
Yep.
Instagram. I even found your Twitter profile.
Yep. I'm
Which-
Farmer Froberg on everything. I made it easy.
Consistent branding. Love it.
Farmer Froberg on everything. And then, of course, goodlivingcompany.com. Check out our
Goodlivingcompany.com. Make sure that gets into show
all of our-
notes.
if you want to taste the simple life.
Taste the simple life. That
Your
might
trademark.
that is the episode title. I've been kind of struggling with that. Taste
I love
the simple life. I like it. Got anything you want put me on a spot about? You want to meet CK?
Let's see. So I was walking around earlier and I was like, I have this habit of asking like questions to people who are asking me questions. And I'm going to be honest, I was really busy earlier and I didn't get to thing, but I do have one thing to leave everybody with, if that's all right.
Okay.
So, I always say this in anything that I do, and I don't mean to sound cliche, but 2 years ago, I didn't have an ounce of social media, and in a way, I didn't know like what I wanted to be when I grew up, if you will. Like I knew I wanted to work in agriculture, but I really didn't know. And TikTok has showed me, and this sounds crazy, but TikTok, in my opinion, has showed me that truly anything is possible. And I don't mean to sound cliche, but 2 years ago, if you'd asked me, hey, are you going to be on the Weather Channel once a month, like talking about what's seasonal in your area? Or did you know that you're going to own your own business with a guy in Nebraska selling farm fresh stuff? Or, hey, you're going to have 600,000 followers on this app that, people are generally dancing on.
Yeah, that people do stupid dances on.
Yeah, I would have been like, no. And there's so many other doors that I can't even talk about yet.
Yeah, that are getting
that
open.
that might be opened. And so if you're on the fence about something in your life, just do it. Like if the only reason you're not doing it is because of doubt in yourself, that's generally called imposter syndrome, and everybody goes through it.
Absolutely.
And just do it, because if I can do it, if this kid from Alvin, Texas can do it, then chances are anybody listening to this podcast right now can absolutely do it. And like, you see people on these apps, and I think people associate what their life is actually like, and that their life is somehow different, and it's not. Right? All of these people who are building their dreams, it all started with one decision to do something. And so whatever that decision needs to be for you today, knock it out. Life is too short. And the worst that's going to happen is you're going to be in the same place you are right now with a new dream to try to achieve, or the same dream in a different way.
There's 2 reasons you don't find success. You don't start looking for it, and you quit too early.
Bingo. If I had stopped making content every time a video flopped, gosh, I'd had 1,000 followers.
The viral ones are harder for me. Like just because that little bit of negative feedback. I mean, yeah, like the positivity, there's every video that's got negative feedback. There's always a ton of people that, overwhelming positive vibes, but sometimes the negativity gets to me on the viral videos, and they're a little bit harder on me than like just reaching my normal core audience. But
can I say one more thing? Sorry, I know we're like way over to the negative comments, and you don't even
have all the time that you have.
Hey, you don't even have to put this in the show. This could just be us talking. But my very first video that I ever posted was when I was I wasn't an ag teacher anymore, but I videoed it when I was ag teaching. And I had taken a group of kids to Tarleton State for a livestock judging contest. And anytime we went anywhere, I always like to take the kids on a field trip. And while they were judging, I went and drove around, and I found the Tarleton State Dairy Facility, and went and I said, hey, I got 9 high school kids with me. What can we come and do? She said, if you can get here by 4, they can run the milking parlor. I said, we'll be here. Like, take this group of I didn't tell them, right? Take this group of high school kids. We all milked a cow. Anyways, the video is from that. It's me hooking up a cow. So the very first video that I posted on TikTok got 10,000 views, right? And there's a couple comments on there. Why'd you do it like that? Hey, you hooked that up wrong. What kind of parlor is that? What are you wearing? And I remember thinking, like, these people are jerks. What's the deal? And I made a few more, they didn't do anything. And then the next viral video was, and again, I didn't know what TikTok was or what I was going to be doing on TikTok. And so I had made a snack that I make. It's chia pudding. So you take chia seed and honey and milk and leave it overnight, whatever. And I don't know, it got 100,000 views or something. I was ecstatic, and people were saying stuff on it. What are you doing? Why are you mixing it that way? Why would you use that brand? Why did you do this?
That brand sucks. You should try this brand.
Yeah. God, these people are jerks. And then the next viral video is the same, like people saying stuff. And then I just realized that, like, man, people say stuff. And again, that's where I made the decision that, like, I'm not gonna delete them, because I want them to know. Sometimes I'll like them. I want them to know that I saw
them. Yeah.
I saw it.
No reaction.
Like I had no reaction whatsoever. And my next video, I'm going to be just as smiling, right?
Good.
I get a lot of not a lot. Every now and again, I'll get people make comments about my belt buckles, right? So I showed in high school. So I have a various assortment of belt buckles that I in fact won, but because I'm a vegetable farmer, apparently I'm not supposed to wear a belt buckle. And again, I don't make any comment, but I do make an effort to always have my shirt tucked in so everyone can see that. So
or anyone somebody's cowboy hat and see if they melt down because vegetable farmers aren't supposed to wear.
I know. It's fantastic.
Can I also say, though, is it's always usually just a reflection of the negativity is always a reflection of who they are being mirrored onto you guys. So I think that's something I also have to remind myself too when I get any kind of criticism is, wow, this is really just a reflection of you and how your brain works and not necessarily what I have done or decided not to do.
I hear a lot. I think a lot of criticism is often said to a mirror without people being self-aware that there's a mirror.
Yeah.
A lot of criticism is self-criticism, I think. And people are just afraid to confront that about themselves. And it's easier to lash out to a random internet person that they'll never have any sort of personal connection to and probably never ever interact with again. It's a quick and easy serotonin boost just to be a dick to that person and move on with your day.
Yeah. And honestly, what I found is I think people know that I don't respond to stuff like that. Like, I think now it's like, it's well enough known. And in fact, like, I never do, obviously, like, I don't do dances or anything like that. Yesterday, we're out at our new ground. One of my buddies is over there helping me with some stuff. And he was like, dude, let's do this dance. He likes to do real goofy stuff. I'm not doing that. So let's just do it. I did it. Not a single negative comment on this video. And I would think that would be like a target, right? Like, I'm standing on top of a farm hall and he's on the ground and we're like perfectly in sync doing this dance. Not a single bad comment. They're all like, yeah, go. And
if you post a picture of you driving a pickup and shifting from one gear to another, somebody will tell you you're doing it wrong.
That's fair. That's fair.
Tyler, it has been an absolute blast, my man.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us today.
Great. Thank y'all for having me. This was great. Hopefully we'll talk to y'all again soon.
CK, anything on your mind before we go?
No, a lot of gratitude. This week is Thanksgiving, so I just think I have a lot of gratitude for having you on, just also seeing more of where our food comes from and just the similarities we have in different climates. So it's just interesting to learn about something that's not just beef too. So it's nice.
I love
Yeah.
it.
Well, we're gonna go ahead and get right out of here, guys.
All right.
Red
Thank
Hills
y'all
Ranch-
very much.
Red Hills Rancher, y'all have a good week, and remind, shake the hand that feeds you.